Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee Workshop. Today we continue the odyssey of our shop-built kitchen with the wet wall, where you find the sink and the dishwasher and related storage. That's next, right here in the new Yankee Workshop. Well, before we start building the wet wall, where we have the sink and the dishwasher, I want to confirm some of my measurements. One thing that's not changing is the window. So I want to keep the sink centered on the window and build the cabinets to it. Down below, I'm going to build one cabinet from the corner to the dishwasher. It'll incorporate the sink base and a bank of drawers. That's a nice ending point because the dishwasher is here, and then I'll build a second cabinet that will go from the dishwasher to the refrigerator. And that's going to be about 64 inches long. I'll cut it in half and build two banks of drawers, but it'll be one single unit. Now up above, we'll build a wall cabinet with glass panels for the doors, but I want to raise this because there's a problem here. We've got a 14-inch height between the counter and the cabinet. The appliances are trapped in there. Standard height today is 18 inches, so we'll raise that up a bit. On this side, I have another cabinet to build. This will have a solid panel. And the only thing I have to accommodate is this box, which encloses the ductwork for the range hood. Now there's another issue here. Standard cabinets are 24 inches deep, which means the area behind the sink is very narrow. But because we're building the kitchen, we can build it any way we want. So I'm going to build the cabinets 2 inches deeper. That'll give us a lot of extra room. I think I have all my measurements. Let's get started. Well, we've got a lot to do today as we start building our wet wall. So I've already constructed the carcasses for the base cabinets. Here's where the range would be over here. We turn the corner, there'll be a bank of drawers. The sink is going to go right here. There'll be a space for the dishwasher, and then two more banks of drawers. Now, one note about these cabinets. When the face frame is applied, they'll be 26 inches deep. A standard cabinet is 24. The reason we made them deeper is because we had the room in the kitchen, and it will give me more space behind the faucet, which is always a crowded area. So let's get started by building a face frame. Here are the elements for our face frame. I'm going to install all the pieces with pocket screws. I'm using a spacer to make sure the drawer opening is correct. It's better than marking it out. And I have this clamp with a couple pads on it, which will hold the pieces flush as I drive the screw. Works every time. I want to show you what happens where this face frame meets the hot wall. I have this wide panel that I'm installing, and that will provide clearance so when the drawers are opened, they won't hit the handles on the range. Take note that I'm using a piece of primed plywood, and that's much more stable than a solid board would be. Okay, let's see how we're doing. If all my measurements are correct, when I add the bead to this side, I'm going to be flush with the inside of the case, and I am, and the same thing on this side. And that looks good. So now I have to cut corresponding slots in the back of the frame to align with the grooves I've made in the carcass. The key to this system is that both the carcass and the face frame have to be accurate. You can't force the frame to fit the carcass. Now, if I've done everything right, this should fit like a glove. Okay, that looks perfect. Now we'll clamp her up. While this sets up, I want to build the drawer fronts and the doors. Here are the elements for the drawer front frame as well as a panel, and here's a door and the panel. The joinery is a groove in all the pieces to receive the panel as well as the tenons that I'll form on the rails. Before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. The setup for the grooves is a 1/4-inch dado, a rip fence, and a featherboard. Here's the setup for forming the tenons: a sacrificial fence, a wider dado, and a good miter gauge. The material I'm using for the panels is 3/8-inch MDF, and it takes paint beautifully. It won't fit in the slot unless I rabbet the back edge, and that's what this setup is for. Glue and clamps are all I need to hold this drawer front together. Okay, while these cook, I'll take the clamps off the carcass and apply the bead to the openings. I've carefully mitered all the pieces of the bead and dry fit them. On an earlier episode, I showed you how to make this bead at the router table. I roll a little glue on the back side, hold it flush to the inside of the stiles and rails, and just put a couple pins to hold it while the glue dries. Now I want to install a partition between these two narrow drawers. I need a place to attach the drawer runners. So it starts with this cleat, which is screwed to the case, and then this double layer of plywood, which will get glued and screwed right behind this divider. Now I'll secure that partition with a few screws through the back and the top. You've seen me make this style of door before, as well as the moldings. Now after the door dried, I sanded all the joints smooth. I dry fitted the moldings, making sure they all fit perfectly. Now I'm just gluing them in place, and I'll pin them as necessary to hold them while the glue dries. Well, now I'm getting ready to make the drawers, and I've set up my dovetailing jig because between the side and the front of the drawer I'm going to use a half-blind dovetail. It only shows on this side, it doesn't show on the front. With this jig, the first thing to do is to cut the tails. With the front of the drawer box mounted on the top of the jig and the fingers flipped over, I'm able to route the pins. That's the dado to receive the back of the drawer box. Now that's a groove that I need on all four sides of the large drawers for a 1/2-inch thick bottom. With 2 passes through a single saw blade, I'm able to produce a groove to receive the 1/4-inch bottom on the small drawers. These notches, made with 2 cuts on the bandsaw, are necessary to receive the drawer runners. With so many surfaces and this interlocking joint, the glue should be plenty to hold this together after it sets. I like to use a little bit of glue along the front groove, and now the bottom goes in. Now some more glue in those dados that we cut earlier to hold the back. We'll slip it in and secure it with a few brads. I've got my specifications for the drawer slides, and this is the first time that I've actually used this particular slide. So I think I'll stay here tonight until I figure out everything. I have a little jig to pre-drill the holes. I'll get that figured out and try one of the drawers. And tomorrow morning I'll be able to show you how they get installed. Hey, look at that. Don't they work great? Now I did stay last night, and I started by spending some time with the instructions figuring out how to mount the runners and the related hardware on the box. And I got to tell you, these work great. Now let me show you the system. There are runners. There's a right and a left for each drawer, and those have to get attached to the case. Now to hold them in place, I made these sticks and used some spring clamps so they won't move out of the way. And I just set the runner right on top of it, locate where I want it, and there are several holes in which I can put screws to secure it. There are multiple holes, so if one doesn't work, you can use another one. I use 2 screws to get started, and later I'll add more as necessary. Now let me show you the drawer. Here's one of the drawer boxes. This is the front, this is the back. You might recall that I notched out the back to receive the runner. I have this jig from the manufacturer to locate the holes. The first hole I want to drill is for a pin that engages the runner. At the front of the drawer, there's a left and right device to engage the runner. I need pilot holes for the screws, so again, I set the jig, a different bit this time, and just drill a pilot hole. Now you'll see why the jig is important, because this is an angled hole. Now to install the box, I just drop it on top of the runners, push it in, hear it engage, and we'll test it out. That works great. Now I'll install the big ones. And as easy as that, they're in. Now one thing about the drawer runners that we use today compared to 30 years ago is that you don't see them. They're totally concealed. They're extra heavy duty, so they'll support good loads. Full extension and soft close. They're very easy to install. And one thing that I really like about these is that they're fully adjustable, and that's real important with inset panels, and you'll see that in a minute. Well, now I want to install one of the drawer fronts. Now these are inset panels, and that's one of the most difficult things to do. I want a very accurate gap all the way around. It has to be nice and even, so you have to take your time and fit everything carefully. I'm going to push it to the top and lower it down about 1/16 of an inch. And then check each side to make sure the gap is even. And now I'm just going to pin it to hold it in place. Okay, I'm happy with the gap. Now I'm going to carefully remove it. And they're a snap to remove. I just reach underneath, squeeze the releases, and out it comes. I'll drill pilot holes and attach it with screws. All right, drop it back in there. All right, now my gap is still good, but you'll note that the face of the drawer is inside of the face frame. Not a problem, I can adjust that. Now you see this little device right here? It has a screw, and you'll see a little pad start to move out. I'll do that on each side and check it. I'd say that's pretty good. Now to give you some sense of what the finished cabinet is going to look like, I've just taped these doors in place. The small drawers will get solid fronts made out of MDF, and there'll be a fixed front here where the sink is located. Now I want to turn my attention to a wall cabinet, the one above the dishwasher, where there's going to be a lot of heavy plate storage. All right, here's the carcass for that wall cabinet and the associated face frame. Again, it's built out of the pre-finished plywood, and that's important in this case because the doors will have glass panels, so we're going to see the inside. It has to look real good. Note, I've also made the continuous groove again to receive the biscuits to attach the face frame. And on this end, I've applied a piece of 3/8 inch MDF because it's going to be seen. We're going to paint this. And these screws won't show because the cornice molding will cover those. The continuous groove in the carcass makes it easy to locate the biscuits. Here I'm working on the bottom of the cabinet, and you'll take note that I've made a substantial recess in the bottom. That will allow for an under-cabinet light to go in, and you won't see it. Well, while the face frame cooks, let's make some doors. Here's one of the 3 doors that I need for that cabinet. It's going to have a glass panel, just like the original kitchen, no divided lights, one single pane of glass. We want it to look like the doors that have the solid panels, so I have the same molding profile around the edge. But the assembly is a little different. Instead of just a simple groove and tenon, I'm using a mortise and tenon joint to join the pieces together. We'll do that first. The stiles receive the mortises. I've laid them out. I'm using my dedicated mortiser with a 1/4-inch square chisel. Now I've tried to center the mortise as closely as possible, but I always turn the piece around and run it again. That way I know it's centered. Now the tenons, and here's the setup. A stop block, which controls the length of the tenon. The first step is to make a pass on each face, known as the shoulder cut. Now with the blade raised slightly, I'm going to nibble away the top and bottom of each tenon. To complete each tenon, I need a couple cheek cuts using my tenoning jig. Now some glue and clamps to lock these joints in place. Well, the face frame glue is set up, the clamps have been removed, and I've sanded all the joints even. Now I have to install the bead around all the openings, and that's all about mitering. I've dry fitted all the pieces and now I'm installing them. Roll a little glue on the inside edge. Now when I made this bead at the router table, I used a 3/16" diameter bead. And when I ripped it, I make sure that I leave this flat spot, this little shoulder. It's critical to the way it looks. It separates the bead from the edge of the face frame. A few pins will secure it while the glue sets. And these pins are so tiny, you won't even see them. Now I need to drill some holes for the shelf pins that will support the shelves. I've tipped the cabinet up on its side, and I have this simple jig. It's a clear plastic jig with holes evenly spaced. I've located the center line of the inside of the cabinet on the height. I'm going to align it with the center of the jig, right over that line. And I'm going to use this drill that comes with the jig. It has a spring-loaded collar that stops at just the right place to drill the hole the correct depth, and it also locates it in the jig. Once it's on the center, I'm going to drill this hole first. I'm going to slide the jig up, take a shelf pin, put it in there so it can't move while I drill the rest of the holes. That's probably enough holes, but I want to drill one more at the bottom in case I want to have the shelf closer together. So I pull the pin, slide it down 2 notches, lock it on this end, and drill one more hole. So now for the holes along the back edge, I simply turn the jig around, center it again, drill the first hole, and then we'll lock it in place. Now we'll just flip the cabinet over and drill corresponding holes on the other side. Now I've set the cabinet on its back, and I'm going to add a row of holes for pins along the center line of this back panel, and that'll give support to these extra long shelves. Well, now we're back to the doors, and the next step is to create a groove to receive this spline. It's actually made out of 1/8" plywood. To cut the groove, I'm going to use my router, which has this slot cutting bit with a 1/8" wide cutter and a bearing that'll guide it around the inside. This 1/8" plywood is a little difficult to find, but if you go to a plywood supplier, they should have it. I've put some glue in the groove, and it's a nice snug fit, so I just get it started and then take a block of wood and tap it in. I've dry fitted all the pieces, and now I'm putting some glue on both the spline and the edge of the frame, because that's what's really going to hold it in here. Here's a cross section of the molding, sort of an OG profile with a little chamfered outer edge. The piece just gets set in just like this. When I get all the pieces in, I'll pin them as necessary. Okay. Now the spline is very helpful, because if I didn't have the spline there, I'd only have glue on one edge, this 1/4" edge. Now I have a 90-degree corner with plenty of surface for the glue, and it'll add a lot of strength to hold the glass. These pins should disappear under the paint, but we need them to hold the molding while the glue sets. Now I'm going to work on some shelves for that upper case. They're very simple, made again out of the pre-finished plywood. And I've ripped it to the correct width, and now I'm cross-cutting it. In all the cabinets, it's important to have everything perfectly square, and that's why I like to use this homemade panel cutter. It has a runner that runs in the miter gauge slot of the table saw, and this fence is absolutely 90 degrees to the saw blade. It's an indispensable tool. Once I put the mark on the piece the length that I want, I simply slide it over to the end of the stop, and it'll cut it exactly the length I need. All right, let's see how we did for length. That's good, no side-to-side play. Now I want to cover the veneers, the core veneers. And I want it to match the maple, so I'm going to use a piece of maple. Here I'm trying to avoid the use of mechanical fasteners, so once again I'm going to turn to biscuits. Now you'll note that this maple strip is wider than the thickness of the shelf, and that's deliberate. I want to add strength to the front edge of the shelf, and with that pin in the middle of the back, this will handle as much china and glasses as these shelves will hold. I want to show you the hinges that we're using on this project. They're known as non-mortise hinges, sort of a chrome finish. If I were to use mortise hinges, I'd have to carefully cut a mortise in the stile and one in the door, and I'd have no adjustability. With these inset doors, I want to have the ability to move the door around later. This section gets attached to the stile first. The other leaf goes on the door, and as you can see, there's a slot, so there's some adjustability if we need it. All right, let's see how we did. Pretty good margin around the edges. And what I like about this system is that by raising this lower shelf, I have a stop for the door at this bottom edge. I've installed a piece of poplar up here, which also acts as a stop, and that keeps the door nice and flush to the face frame. And here's the finished product, the wet wall, where you find the sink, the dishwasher, and related storage, lots of storage. On this side, a bank of drawers, nice big drawers filled with pans. And because we built deeper cabinets, we have more room around the sink, making it a lot easier to clean. Dishwasher is set here, more storage on this side. And what's nice about these big deep drawers is that you don't have to crawl around in a dark cabinet. You can see everything, and the hardware works so smoothly. Plenty of room between the counter and the upper cabinets for appliances. And this dish storage area works out well with the glass panel doors, and they're close to the dishwasher where they belong. Now I don't mind building the cabinets so long as someone else does the dishes. Now let me tell you what we're going to do next time. We'll be building the pantry, probably the most indispensable area in any kitchen. A place for the dry goods, the large cans, the small cans, the bottles. And in this case, the cook has asked for a special location for a large box of plastic wrap. So we have our work cut out for us. That'll be next time right here in the New Yankee Workshop.
If you've enjoyed this New Yankee project, you may want to try some of the others. There are projects meant for the workshop, the garden, the kitchen, and many more. So whether you're a fan of shaker style, or colonial, arts and crafts, or Chippendale, there may be a Norm project you'd like to build. Whether it's a clock or a gazebo, a picnic bench or a Windsor chair, a child's toy or a sailboat, visit the New Yankee website at www.newyankee.com for a complete listing.